Good evening. We extend our gratitude to everyone tuning in today, particularly to those brave enough to join us in the dark. Lights out. We're excited to share the tales for this episode and encourage you to like and subscribe to OneDeepVoid to become a part of this community. Once again, welcome and enjoy. Grab your favorite beverage and allow yourself to be immersed. I was going through an emotional crisis, a very strong depression, which is classic in adolescence, you know. In my desperation, I decided to follow my uncle's advice. He said, "Ask Santa Muerte for advice. Ask for anything, whatever it is. It's really easy," he assured. "You don't necessarily need to make an altar. You can just put up a printed photo, a little candle, and a glass of water and pray to her. With that prayer, she will get you whatever you want." Young and naive, I decided to listen to him. So I set up my little candle, my photo, and the glass of water next to my bed, on a small wooden table where I arranged everything. Every night I prayed and prayed and prayed. Everything was, well, normal. Truthfully, I didn't even believe in it, but I thought, well, what do I have to lose, right? Then one night I woke up to a strange smell, like something burning, and realized that the table was on fire. But the fire was coming only from the table, as if the table itself was generating the fire. I reacted as fast as I could, throwing blankets, sheets, and everything at it to extinguish the flames. Fortunately, it was put out, but it was very strange. The image of Santa Muerte hadn't been affected at all. It was intact. I found it odd, but said, well, maybe it's something normal. Yes, it scared me, but I thought, this can't be real. Maybe it was a fluke, but it can have an explanation. I continued, and things started to get weirder and weirder. I began having sleep paralysis, seeing shadows passing in my room at night, and I started to get scared. So I went to my uncle and told him what had happened, and he said, "This is happening because you're not having enough faith. You have to have faith. You have to believe in this." And I thought, well, I don't believe. I mean, maybe it has something to do with Santa Muerte, but I thought, why involve myself with something I don't fully understand? I got rid of everything related to Santa Muerte, but it seems that was a mistake because the sleep paralysis became even stronger. I started to see shadows, children, people in my room, people whispering in my ear. Scared, I went to my ex's mother at that time, who practiced white magic, and she told me, "You have to pray the Our Father and you have to sleep with a rosary." And I was like, what? Okay. So I started doing that, but from there the sleep paralysis intensified significantly. One day, as I lay there, I opened my eyes and found myself unable to move. Looking out from the room, I could see the hallway, and I saw a long shadow go into the next room. It was my mother's room. I was terrified because clearly what I had seen was the figure of Santa Muerte. I reacted, and the sleep paralysis went away. I got up and went to my mother's room. I opened the door and saw her, just her. I was very, very scared. So I decided it was better to sleep with her. I lay down and fell asleep. Some hours passed, maybe, I don't know, and I experienced sleep paralysis again. I opened my eyes and saw my mom sitting on the edge of the bed, crying but covering her face, crying and crying and crying. But somehow, I managed to turn my eyes to the other side and see that my mother was asleep. Even though I knew that the person who was crying was not my mom, I knew it, I felt it. I was very scared. I tried to pray the Our Father in my mind, but I forgot the prayer. So I just closed my eyes tightly until I fell asleep. As time passed, I continued to recite the prayers and cling to my rosary, and gradually, things began to settle. However, even now, 5 years later, the episodes of sleep paralysis have significantly decreased. They occur perhaps once every 4 or 5 months. Yet, occasionally, I still hear someone crying in my mother's room. Each time I rush to check, only to find my mother alone and asleep. While the sleep paralysis might have faded, it seems something else lingered from that time. And that concludes my story.
Get me out.
I need to tell you a really scary and sad story that happened to me. But first, I want to make sure no one knows my name or where I live. It's important to keep that a secret. I hope you get why this story is so sad for my family. A few years back, my Aunt Kelsey, which isn't her real name, sadly died right outside my house because her heart stopped working. I was there when it happened. I heard her knock, then heard her fall down. It scared everyone, even our neighbors. They heard my mom screaming and called for an ambulance fast. I thanked our neighbors for helping us out. Then I went back inside. Hours later, my phone rang. It was my mom telling me Aunt Kelsey was gone for good when she got to the hospital. It made me really sad, especially because she was the only parent my little cousins had. A few days after we said goodbye to Aunt Kelsey, something weird happened. I was getting home in the evening when a neighbor said he was glad my aunt was feeling better. I was confused and asked what he meant. He told me he saw her standing on our roof early in the morning just looking around. I didn't tell him she had passed away, but it really freaked me out. I kind of forgot about it after that. But then, people who were there that day kept saying they were happy my aunt was okay. Some even scolded me, saying I should make her rest in bed because they saw her on the roof in the mornings. I didn't tell them she was no longer with us. But everyone talking about seeing her became a big deal in our neighborhood. My mom had to tell them the truth, that Aunt Kelsey had died. After that, no one wanted to come out in the mornings anymore unless they really had to. They would avoid our house because they claimed to see a woman's shape on the roof. I didn't see or hear anything, and neither did my mom or anyone living with us, but all our neighbors said they saw the same thing. Months went by and we had to look after my cousins. The first night they stayed over, we were woken up by a woman's crying, full of sadness, coming from right in front of our house. Hearing that cry froze me with fear. But my dad got us to gather in the yard to listen as the crying slowly went away. This kept happening for several nights. It was Aunt Kelsey, crying because she was gone and sad about leaving my cousins. We never went outside to look even though we heard her crying. My dad said it was too risky to open the door. My family says sometimes you can still see my aunt in the mornings, either sitting or standing on our roof. And back when the kids were over more often, we would usually hear that crying. Now it doesn't happen as much, but every now and then when my cousins visit, we hear it again. The weirdest part is, this only happens at our house, not at my grandmother's or my other aunt's place. Thanks for letting me share this with you. This is the first story I'm sharing with you all. Have you ever cursed someone? I don't mean just insulting them, but really wishing something bad would happen to them, and then it actually does? Well, oddly enough, my family has had many things like this happen. And this is just one of those many stories. My aunt was a woman with a strong character who unfortunately married a man who only mistreated her. You know, one of those alcoholics who demand to be served all the time and only get married to have someone take care of them. My aunt's life wasn't easy. Being the oldest, she had to almost become a mother to her 6 siblings, though that didn't last long since she married at a very young age. During her marriage, she had to endure mistreatment, insults, and death threats. Her children were the only thing that kept her strong, so she put up with everything until she got terrible news. She was diagnosed with diabetes. We all know the diseases that can come from diabetes, but her husband never understood. Instead of supporting her, he continued his routine of mistreatment that had lasted for just over 3 decades. In fact, he even had the nerve to bring the woman he had been having an affair with for at least a decade to my poor aunt's deathbed. This was the last straw, and led her to say the following words. "What a lesser man you are, having the nerve to bring your other woman here. You say you're tired of me because I can't move, because I'm an old diabetic, because I spend most of the day in bed. Well, I just hope that just as you see me, you will see yourself, and 10 times worse. I hope you have no way to get out of bed, that you can't even speak. I hope that the same woman you brought to my house is with you when they have to carry you to get up, and that no matter how much you beg God for your death, you don't die until you pay for everything you've done to me." My grandma was one of the people present at this moment, and she told me those words echoed in that room like thunder. Unfortunately, a couple of days later, Aunt Lily died of a heart attack. About 7 years later, the cemetery where they had buried her needed to exhume the body to free up the grave for another family member. And here comes the most terrifying part of the story. When they opened the coffin, the gravedigger let out a terrifying scream because he couldn't believe that the body of Aunt Lily was not decomposed. It looked as if time hadn't passed, as if she had been buried that very morning. Hearing these words from the gravedigger, her abuser couldn't believe it, so he decided to go down and inspect it for himself. And as he was about to go down, he tripped and fell into the coffin. Those present say they only heard his screams begging for help, and no matter how much the gravedigger and 2 of his sons tried to open the coffin, something prevented it. Some say it was an accident. Others think Aunt Lily wanted to take him with her. What's certain is that when he managed to get out, his face was pale and dislocated. And here's the curious part. After that scare, he was diagnosed with a very aggressive type of diabetes. In the end, Aunt's curse found its way. The man who had mistreated her for so many years was now a burden to the woman he had brought to his wife's deathbed years ago. He had become undesirable to his children, couldn't move without someone's help, couldn't speak, and even had to have a leg amputated due to his condition. The curse made its way so much that, according to the few people who still see him, there are nights when he only utters one word while looking terrified at a corner of his room.